Long ago in the sun-drenched kingdom of Zulwata, surrounded by baobab trees, whispering winds and sacred rivers, a secret was buried beneath the marble floors of the royal palace. On a stormy night, Queen Nalei gave birth to a son. At the very same hour, in a run-down village hut on the outskirts of Zulwata, a palace maid named Tando also birthed a son. Both babies cried into the wind, unaware of the destiny that fate had twisted. In the shadows of the palace, the royal midwife, driven by envy and a bribe from a powerful court sorcerer who sought to disrupt the royal lineage, switched the babies. The royal heir was taken to be raised as a commoner, while the maid's son, now wearing silk, slept in the queen's arms. The kingdom of Zulwata stretched across fertile valleys and rolling hills, kissed by the winds of the east and protected by a mighty river called Ulama, which was believed to be the resting place of ancient spirits. The palace itself stood like a crown jewel atop the highest hill, its golden domes gleaming under the hot African sun, surrounded by red clay walls and towering baobab trees. And standing tall among the rows of palace guards was Kunto, a young man whose mere presence demanded respect, even though he bore no royal title. With a well-carved frame of muscle from years of training and patrol, and dark, glowing skin like polished mahogany, Kunto had become a favorite among the people of the palace. His jaw was chiseled, his eyes sharp as an eagle's, and his voice deep enough to silence even the loudest gossip. No one knew exactly where Kunto had come from. Some whispered he was the child of a wandering warrior. Others said he was found as a baby near the riverbank wrapped in fine cloth. But Kunto never cared to chase the answers. He had been raised by an old palace cook, Mama Yaya, who treated him like her own. She taught him discipline, humility, and to never forget his dreams, no matter how distant they seemed. Every morning, Kunto rose before the first cockcrow. He would kneel facing the east, whispering a silent prayer to the ancestors before polishing his spear and donning his leather armor. His assigned post was the southern palace gate, the one that led to the servant quarters and the inner courtyard. Though it was not the most prestigious location, Kunto guarded it with pride. It was during one of these early morning duties that he saw her, the palace maid named Zuri. She was balancing a wooden basin of freshly washed linen on her head, humming softly as she walked by. Her beauty was effortless, her walk graceful like the sway of tall grass in the wind. She wore a plain wrap of blue fabric, and her tightly coiled hair was tied neatly with a strip of indigo cloth. But it was her eyes that struck Kunto, deep brown with golden flecks like firelight dancing in a well. Zuri greeted him with a polite nod. He simply stared for a moment before regaining his composure and nodding back, his heart thumping like a royal drum. From that day, Kunto found excuses to linger at the gate even after his shift. Zuri, curious but cautious, would steal glances his way. The connection was unspoken, but it pulsed in the air between them. Kunto's fellow guards often teased him. "Ah, so the mighty lion of Zulwata is chasing butterflies now," laughed Omari, one of the older guards. Kunto smiled faintly. Even a lion pauses when the wind carries the scent of something pure. But as days passed, Kunto began to experience more than love. He began to dream, vivid, strange dreams. In them, he wore a crown of cowries and gold, seated on a throne beneath the great Iroko tree, while hundreds bowed before him. He dreamed of a lion walking beside him, and flames that rose but never burned him. Each time he awoke, his chest would tingle, and he would find himself gripping the strange sun-shaped birthmark just over his heart. These dreams confused him. He was but a guard, a mere protector of doors and walls, wasn't he? One evening, after a long patrol shift, Kunto walked to the edge of the stone garden, an old place behind the palace known for its stillness. There he met Mama Yaya, now aged and nearly blind, seated under a neem tree. "My boy," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you are more than you believe. Sometimes, the river does not flow straight, but it always reaches the sea." "What do you mean, Mama?" Kunto asked, frowning. But she said nothing more. She just stared into the distance with cloudy eyes, as if seeing spirits dancing across the land. Little did Kunto know, the winds of Zulwata were shifting. The ancestors were stirring, and truth, long buried in silence, was about to rise. The kingdom of Zulwata thrived under its aging monarch, King Olanma, who had ruled with dignity for nearly 3 decades. But now, the old king walked with a staff and coughed more than he spoke. Behind the palace walls, whispers slithered like snakes through the corridors. Who would succeed the king? The supposed crown prince, Damon, was the king's only recognized heir. He was tall, pampered, and dangerous in his entitlement. While Kunto trained with spears and served the kingdom, Damon spent his days in silk robes playing aware, mocking servants, and drinking palm wine laced with spices from foreign lands. Zulwata's elders and chiefs quietly worried. "This is not the lion we need for the coming storms," they muttered. But deep within the palace, something stirred that would change the course of the kingdom forever. In the heart of the royal archives was an ancient, dust-ridden chamber called the Room of Roots, only accessible to the Queen Mother, Ajuna. She was a sharp-eyed woman, graceful but unshaken, the daughter of warriors and priestesses. One afternoon, while overseeing the renovation of the archives, a section of the wall collapsed, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside it, covered in cobwebs and wrapped in leopard hide, lay a single parchment scroll. Queen Mother Ajuna unrolled it slowly, her hands trembling. It was the confession of the royal midwife, who had served the palace over 20 years ago. Her words, written in a rushed hand, revealed a dark betrayal. "Forgive me, ancestors. On the night of the prince's birth, I was bribed by the sorcerer Maro. He wished to place a puppet on the throne. I switched the queen's baby with that of the maid, Tando. The true prince lives. But as a servant." Ajuna's heart thundered. She clutched the scroll and summoned the palace seers, who confirmed the tale with ancestral bones and flame-reading rituals. All signs pointed to a single name whispered by the spirits: Kunto, summoned by the crown. That same evening, as the sun melted into crimson and the palace drums began to sound for the evening meal, a royal messenger approached the southern gate. "Guard Kunto," he said, bowing. "You are summoned by Her Majesty the Queen Mother." The other guards fell silent. Kunto furrowed his brows. "Why me?" "Come," the messenger said. "The ancestors call." He followed in confusion, spear still strapped across his back. The journey through the palace's golden halls felt different this time, like the walls were watching him, as if the ancestors walked beside him. Inside the royal chamber, he found Queen Mother Ajuna, surrounded by seers and priestesses. The air shimmered with ancestral incense. A bowl of glowing river stones sat in the center. "Kunto," the Queen Mother said gently, "remove your shirt." Confused, he obeyed. Gasps echoed around the room. There it was, the sun-shaped birthmark on his chest, glowing faintly under the sacred light. "Place your hand in the bowl of flame," one of the seers instructed. He did. The flames rose but did not burn him. Instead, they danced in golden patterns, forming the symbol of Zulwata's royal crest, a lion beneath the rising sun. There was no denying it. The ancestors had spoken. The truth revealed. Days later, the entire kingdom was summoned to the palace square. Chiefs, warriors, commoners, and nobles alike gathered under the wide acacia trees. King Olanma stood tall, despite his age, holding the royal spear. "My people," he declared, "a truth hidden by lies has been uncovered. The son I raised as prince, is not my blood. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He turned and gestured. From behind the golden veil stepped Kunto, now dressed in robes of indigo and gold, a lion-tooth pendant resting on his chest. This, the king thundered, is Kunto of the Sun Mark, the true prince of Zulwata, born of Queen Nalei, stolen from the cradle and raised with courage. Let all honor him, for he is your future king. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Some wept. Some simply stared in awe. But Zuri, who had quietly stood behind the royal columns, covered her mouth in shock. Kunto, prince. Their eyes met. And though he now wore royal robes, his gaze held the same warmth as when he stood at the southern gate. The royal court had changed. No longer a mere palace guard, Prince Kunto was now the subject of songs sung by griots across Zulwata. Villagers who once passed by him unnoticed now knelt in awe. Chiefs, once dismissive, now bowed. But Kunto, born into fire and forged in humility, remained grounded. He refused to abandon his honor. He still walked the palace grounds barefoot at dawn. He still helped the guards train. He still smiled at the kitchen staff and visited Mama Yaya, the woman who raised him, every evening to kiss her hand. But not everyone in the palace celebrated his rise. The prince in shadows, Damon, the false prince, was humiliated before the entire kingdom. Though spared by the king's mercy, his privileges were stripped, his chambers reassigned, and his guards replaced. To the public, he accepted the change with grace. But in the shadows of his old quarters, Damon's heart boiled with fury. He smashed mirrors, shouted at servants, and consulted dark priests hidden deep in the swamps. Kunto will fall, he swore, and I will return, not just as a prince but as a god. He paid spies to follow Kunto's every move. He watched and waited for weakness. For Kunto, the transition into royalty wasn't smooth. Royal training was grueling. It was no longer about wielding a spear, it was about wielding power with wisdom. He studied ancient laws with the chief scribe, learned diplomacy from foreign envoys, and memorized the complex histories of Zulwata's many clans. He trained in the sacred dance of the Lion Kings, a ritual only performed during coronations. The Council of Elders tested his judgment through riddles, moral dilemmas, and trials. One day, a thief was brought before him, a young boy who stole yams to feed his starving siblings. Old law demands he be punished, said an elder. But Kunto shook his head. Then the law must evolve. Feed his family and give him work in the royal gardens. If we punish hunger, we grow more thieves. The chiefs murmured among themselves. Even the oldest among them nodded. He was born for the crown. Love behind the curtains. Though Kunto now lived in the king's quarters and attended banquets of wild game and wine, his heart remained fixed on Zuri. He caught glimpses of her in the gardens near the fountains, or by the silk curtains during court sessions. But she kept her distance, unsure of where she now stood. One moonless night, Kunto found her by the royal fountain. The stars shimmered above them, and the water glistened with silver reflections. "Why do you avoid me, Zuri?" he asked softly. She bowed her head. "Because you are no longer the man I swept floors beside. You are the sun and I am a shadow." He stepped closer. "No, I am the sky, and you are the star that guides me. You are the one constant in a world that keeps shifting beneath my feet." Tears filled her eyes. Kunto touched her chin. "You knew me before the crown. You believed in me when I was just a guard. That, Zuri, makes you my equal." And for the first time since the truth was revealed, they embraced, not as prince and maid, but as two souls entwined by destiny. The plot to destroy a king. But far across the palace, Damon knelt in a circle of fire and bones. The dark priest, Morrow, once thought to be long gone, returned. His face was painted in ash, his eyes white as bone. "I can give you a chance to reclaim your throne," Morrow hissed. "But it comes at a price." "I'll pay anything," Damon growled. Morrow grinned wickedly. "Then let us awaken the spirit of envy, buried beneath the palace centuries ago. Once unleashed, it will consume the hearts of men and turn the people against your brother." Damon nodded. That night, a dark wind blew through Zulwata. Crops wilted overnight. The river swelled, and animals began fleeing the forest. The kingdom had crowned its true king, but a storm was rising. The people of Zulwata awoke to unease. Birds refused to sing. The market square, once bursting with colors and drums, grew quiet. Crops near the eastern fields shriveled as if touched by unseen fire. The river Ulama, usually crystal clear, turned a strange hue of gray. At first, the elders blamed seasonal changes. The priests said it was the will of the gods. But deep down everyone knew something was wrong. In the royal chambers, King Olanma grew sicker, his breaths shallow, his body cold even beneath layers of fur. The healers whispered that his spirit was fading faster than it should. And Kunto, now the crowned prince of light, began to sense a darkness crawling through the palace like a serpent through tall grass. The poison of whispers. Unrest began to spread like wildfire. Servants spoke of Kunto being a cursed king, a man who brought death to the throne. A section of the council began doubting his leadership. Some nobles, secretly loyal to Damon, spread the lie that Kunto had bewitched the Queen Mother and used black magic to take the crown. And all the while, Damon, dressed in plain cloth but moving like a phantom, fueled the fire. He handed gold to those who spread rumors, promising riches when he returned to power. "Kunto is a fraud," they whispered in alleyways. "He brings bad omens. He's not fit to rule." The serpent was no longer hiding, it was coiling. That same week, Zuri, now working directly in the royal quarters, overheard two nobles plotting in the shadows near the herbal garden. "We will strike during the royal festival. The wine will be tainted. The guards loyal to Damon are ready." She ran through the night, barefoot and breathless, until she reached Kunto's quarters. "Kunto," she cried, "they plan to poison you at the festival." Kunto's eyes darkened. "They dare. You must cancel it." "No," he said, standing slowly. "Let them come. Let the snake show its fangs, so I can cut off its head." Zuri gripped his hand. "Promise me you'll be careful." He squeezed her fingers gently. "For you, I'll face 100 serpents." The Festival of Ancestors. The royal festival arrived, a grand occasion held once every 5 years to honor the spirits of the land. Drums thundered across the valleys, and villagers flooded into the palace grounds wearing feathers, beads, and paint. Dancers twirled, fires burned, and animal skins covered the ceremonial stage. Kunto sat beside Queen Mother Ajuna on the royal dais, cloaked in a robe woven from lion fur and cowries. But his eyes scanned every shadow, every goblet, every motion. As night fell, the ceremonial wine was brought before him. The crowd watched. Kunto lifted the goblet slowly, and then paused. He rose from his seat and walked calmly toward the fire pit at the center of the square. With everyone watching, he poured the wine onto the flames. The fire erupted in purple smoke, unnatural and choking. Screams, panic. Kunto's voice thundered across the square. "Traitors have tried to poison your king." Guards rushed in. In a flash, several nobles tried to escape. One was caught with vials of powder hidden in his robe. Another screamed Damon's name before being silenced. And then Damon appeared. Clad in dark armor, flanked by rogue guards. He stormed into the square with the dark priest Morrow behind him. "The throne is mine," he roared. "Kunto is no king. He is a cursed child." chosen by witches, not warriors. The crowd split in panic, but Kunto stepped forward with no fear. Then face me, Kunto said, drawing the golden spear of the ancestors. No poison, no whispers, just you and me. The battle of blood and light. What followed became legend. In the center of the festival square, beneath the sacred Irako tree, two brothers, one born of envy, one born of truth, faced off. Damon's strikes were vicious, fueled by rage and dark magic whispered by Morrow. But Kunto moved with the strength of the ancestors, each strike guided by justice. The sky crackled, thunder rolled. At the final moment, Damon lunged for Kunto's heart, but Kunto twisted, disarmed him, and placed the golden spear at Damon's throat. Yield, Kunto said. Or die. Damon looked up, eyes burning, and for a moment he considered death. But then he dropped his blade. I yield, he spat. Justice and mercy. Damon and the dark priest were taken away, exiled beyond the river Ulama. The traitorous nobles were stripped of land and title. And the Queen Mother, eyes shining with pride, placed her hand on Kunto's shoulder. You have proven not just your birthright, she said, but your soul. People cheered. The drums rose once more, not for the festival, but for the king who had faced darkness and stood unbroken. That night, in the silence of the palace gardens, Kunto turned to Zuri. I was born in shadows, he said, but your love gave me light. Zuri smiled. And you, my king, gave me something even greater. What? Hope. The sun rose gently over Zulwata, casting golden rays upon a kingdom reborn. The serpents of deceit had been cast out. The river Ulama ran clear again. The birds returned to the sky, and the palace, once shrouded in fear, now rang with laughter and music once more. At the top of the royal hill, the ancestral drum beat low and steady. Today, Kunto would no longer be prince. He would become king. The entire kingdom gathered on the sacred plateau of kings, where Zulwata's rulers had been crowned for generations. Chiefs arrived from distant villages, draped in leopard skin and adorned with gold. Elders brought sacred relics. Children scattered petals of hibiscus and yam leaves. Kunto stood before the people, cloaked in white robes embroidered with the symbols of the ancestors: a lion, a sun, and a flame. The Queen Mother approached, holding the crown of Orla, crafted of pure gold, cowries, lion's mane, and feathers from the legendary red hawk. It had crowned 20 generations of kings. Kunto, son of destiny, she said, her voice proud. Do you accept the crown not for power but for the people? I do. Do you vow to rule not with fear, but with fire and fairness? I do. She lowered the crown onto his head. The drums exploded into rhythm. The horns of ivory rang out. People roared with joy. Kunto was now King Kunto I of Zulwata. The warrior who once stood guard outside the palace now sat upon its highest throne. But while the crowd celebrated, a silent storm brewed among the royal advisors and elders. As per ancient custom, kings were expected to marry from noble blood, daughters of chiefs or royal bloodlines, to strengthen alliances and protect the throne. But Kunto had other plans. Later that evening, after the ceremonies, he called for Zuri. She entered, eyes lowered, wearing a simple yet elegant gown dyed with indigo and patterned with silver thread. She had served silently for weeks, avoiding rumors and glances. Kunto rose from his throne and knelt before her. The court gasped. Zuri, he said, you saw me when I was nothing. You stood by me through shadows and storms. I don't want a queen from duty. I want a queen from love. Will you marry me? Her lips trembled. But I'm not royal. You are, he replied, rising and holding her hand. To me, you've always been more than that. The silence in the throne room was deafening. An elder stepped forward, his brow furrowed. Your Majesty, tradition demands. Tradition should serve the people, not enslave them. Kunto's voice was calm but firm. I will not start my reign in hypocrisy. He turned to Zuri once more. Will you be my queen? Tears fell down her cheeks. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The queen mother smiled from her seat. Then let the gods bear witness. Weeks later, the wedding became the grandest celebration Zulwata had ever seen. Villagers danced for days. Poets composed songs that would echo for generations. Zuri was crowned Queen Zuri of the people's heart, the first woman of humble birth to ascend to the throne. She didn't wear diamonds that day. She wore a crown of woven gold and wildflowers, to remind her of her roots. Kunto, dressed in white lion hide and a sash of red coral, held her hand as they walked through the palace gates together, not as king and maid, but as equals, lovers, and legends. Under the stars, Zuri whispered to him, Do you ever miss the southern gate? He chuckled. Only because it's where I first saw you. King Kunto and Queen Zuri ruled for many years. They built schools, ended unjust traditions, and opened the palace gates once a year for any citizen to speak directly with the king. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and made sure they learned humility before royalty. And whenever travelers asked about the strange sun-shaped birthmark on the king's chest, he would smile and say, It's the mark of a guard who was born to rule. Years passed like the gentle drift of clouds over the Zulwata sky. King Kunto I became known across the lands as the Guard King, a ruler whose strength was matched only by his humility. He was no longer just a legend in his own kingdom. Stories of his rise from servant to sovereign echoed through distant villages, across mountain ridges, and even into foreign lands where kings ruled with iron fists. But even the strongest lion eventually finds rest. The wisdom of age. King Kunto now bore streaks of silver in his hair, and his once muscular frame had softened with time. But his eyes, sharp, knowing, warm, never lost their spark. He no longer rode into villages on horseback but was often found beneath the ancient Irako tree, listening to his people's needs, whispering wisdom to young chiefs in training, or laughing with his grandchildren. By his side always was Queen Zuri, her beauty aged like wine, gentle, wise, radiant. Together they had led the kingdom through 3 droughts, 2 famines, and 1 major war, and still preserved peace, unity, and dignity. It was said that no child in Zulwata ever went to bed hungry during their reign. And when villagers knelt before them, they would say, We kneel not before crowns, but before hearts. One evening their youngest son, Tayo, approached his father beneath the starlit courtyard. Baba, he asked, what makes a man truly a king? Kunto paused and placed a hand on the boy's chest. The crown rests here, he said, tapping the heart. Not on the head. But you were born royal, weren't you? No, Kunto replied with a soft smile. I was born a servant, and only became a king when I learned to serve others first. Tayo nodded, wide-eyed, the lesson carved into his soul. That night, Kunto held Zuri's hand under the stars and whispered, If the world forgets me, it is enough that you remember. She leaned her head on his shoulder. The world will never forget. And even if it does, I will remind them. When Kunto finally passed, it was not in war or sickness, but in peace at sunrise, beneath the Irako tree where his story began. All of Zulwata mourned, not with sorrow alone, but with song, drumming, and dance, for they knew a mighty soul had merely crossed into the land of ancestors. Queen Zuri, now the Queen Mother, led the funeral procession herself. She wore white, not black, as a symbol of light and legacy. With hands raised to the sky, she sang the same song he once hummed at the southern gate. Kunto was buried with honor, wrapped in lion skin, his golden spear beside him, and his heart remembered by all. The legend lives on. Years later, storytellers gathered children under the stars and whispered the tale of Kunto the Guard, who became king not by blood, but by heart. They told of Zuri the maid, who rose from shadows and became queen by courage and love. And when children asked if the story was true, the griots would only smile and say, "Look to the throne of Zulwata. Every ruler since carries the mark of Kunto and the spirit of Zuri." In the sacred halls of the palace, a large mural still stands, of a guard at the gate reaching out to a palace maid. Behind them, a golden crown waiting on a stone throne. It is titled, "The King Who Once Stood Watch."